The spring heat hung thick over Charleston's historic district, but Preston Blackwell barely noticed. He stood alone beneath a magnolia tree on the College of Charleston's oak-shaded campus, his tailored linen suit impeccable, his expression unreadable. Laughter echoed from every direction, families holding bouquets, graduates tossing caps, mothers dabbing tears, but none of it touched him. He wasn't here for the celebration. His eyes were locked on a woman across the quad. Not the graduate in the white stole and crimson honor cords, though she held his gaze like a magnet, but the woman standing beside her smiling through tears. Lorraine. He hadn't seen her in over 2 decades, not since she left without a word. No note, no explanation, just gone like a door closed forever. But there she was, real as the humid breeze curling through the Spanish moss. Her hair, once always pinned back under a housekeeper's scarf, was now swept into a soft bun. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant, quiet, unmistakably her, and the young woman she embraced. Preston's hand tightened around the champagne flute he hadn't yet sipped. The graduate she had Lorraine's grace, but the eyes, the shape of the mouth, the tilt of the chin. His breath caught. Those were his. The crowd faded into background static. Time stilled. All he could see was the girl in the cap and gown leaning into Lorraine's shoulder, laughing, crying, beaming. She looked just like him. Preston turned slightly, trying to steady himself. He wasn't a man easily shaken. He'd built Blackwell Estates from his father's failing empire into one of the largest luxury property groups on the East Coast. He sat on 5 boards, flew private, knew the names of senators and symphony directors. But right now, none of that mattered. This girl, this young woman, had to be his daughter. "Preston," a voice said beside him. He blinked. It was Mark Ellison, the donor whose son he was here to support. Mark clapped him on the back, oblivious. "Appreciate you coming out. College of Charleston isn't exactly the Ivy League, but we're proud of Carter." He pulled off magna cum laude. Not bad for a kid who barely cracked a textbook in high school. Preston forced a smile. "Of course, happy to be here." "Hey, isn't that Lorraine Jameson over there?" Mark squinted across the lawn. "She used to work for your family, didn't she?" In Mount Pleasant, Preston didn't answer. Mark nudged him. "Small world. I didn't realize she was still around Charleston. She wasn't. Not when he last looked." Preston had tried to find her once, years after the breakup. She'd moved, changed numbers, no forwarding address. He assumed she'd wanted to disappear. But now, as he stared across the crowd at the girl in the crimson cords, the timeline added up too perfectly to ignore. 22. College senior, honors graduate, born just months after Lorraine vanished. Mark kept talking, but Preston's thoughts had already drifted far from polite conversation. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A reminder about tonight's engagement dinner at the Harbor Club. Delilah's parents would be there. The Morgans were already calling her the next Mrs. Blackwell. He silenced the notification. He couldn't breathe. Lorraine reached up to brush a strand of hair behind the graduate's ear. The girl leaned in, whispered something, and Lorraine laughed, that laugh low and warm, the one he remembered from late nights in the pantry, when they'd shared secret wine and whispered about leaving the world behind. Back when he still believed love could outlast family threats. He hadn't just lost Lorraine, he'd lost this entire life. The graduate turned toward the stage for photos, and Preston's heart seized. She looked directly at him, their eyes locked, not just a glance, a pause. She blinked, tilted her head slightly, the way he did when curious, then she turned away. He couldn't move. His body was rooted like the ancient live oaks overhead, but his mind was unraveling. Memories surfaced sharp and clear, Lorraine crying quietly in the servant hallway. His mother's tight voice. "If you choose her, don't expect a cent from this family. The envelope, the silence. He hadn't fought for her, and now 22 years later she was here next to the daughter he'd never known, smiling through tears while he stood yards away in a custom suit, paralyzed by the weight of his own choices. The announcement speaker crackled. "Graduates, please make your way to the stage entrance for the recessional ceremony." The crowd stirred. Clapping started. Preston scanned the lawn, trying to track Lorraine and the girl. But they were already turning, already fading into the movement. He couldn't lose them again. He moved fast, slipping between folding chairs and chatting families, heart racing. A security usher gave him a curious look, but he ignored it. 10 steps. 20. A flash of navy. There. They stood near a fountain at the side of the campus courtyard. Lorraine held a small gift bag and looked up just as Preston approached. Her eyes widened. She froze. He stopped 5 feet away. Neither of them spoke. For a moment it felt like they were back in the sunroom of the Blackwell estate 20-something and terrified of the world they didn't belong to. Lorraine's voice was quiet. "Preston?" He swallowed. "I wasn't sure if it was you." She nodded, her face unreadable. "It's been a long time." He looked at the girl beside her. "She's..." Lorraine stepped slightly in front of Avery, protective without being obvious. "This is my daughter, Avery," she said. Avery stepped forward, polite, curious. "Nice to meet you." Preston's voice cracked. "Congratulations. Your speech was... incredible." Avery smiled softly. "Thank you. It was for my mom." Lorraine gave a small nod, her hand resting lightly on Avery's back. Preston saw the gesture and felt something sharp twist in his chest. "I should let you two go," he said, his throat dry. Lorraine's expression softened just slightly. "We're headed to a lunch downtown. Family tradition." He hesitated. Maybe we could talk. Just you and me. Sometime." Lorraine met his eyes. The breeze lifted the hem of her dress. Behind her, Avery laughed at something Miles said, completely unaware of the storm building around her. "I don't know," Preston Lorraine said finally. "It's not just about you and me anymore." He nodded, eyes burning. "I know." Avery turned back to them. "Mom, Uncle Daniel says the restaurant's packed." He's already heading to the car. Lorraine gave Preston a final look, unreadable. "We have to go." He watched as they walked away, his past, his might-have-been his daughter, folding back into a world he'd chosen not to be part of. Until now. He didn't move for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Jude," he said quietly, eyes still on the disappearing figure in crimson and white. "I need you to look someone up. Her name is Avery Jameson, and I want every detail. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way." The elevator rose in smooth silence, its paneled walls reflecting Preston Blackwell's pale reflection back at him. Floor after floor blinked past in gold numbers. 27, 28, 29. At 30, the doors slid open to reveal the penthouse he rarely thought of as home. Preston stepped out, dropped his keys on the marble entry table, and crossed the room in long, uneven strides. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Charleston Harbor bathed the space in soft afternoon light. Outside, sailboats drifted in lazy patterns. Inside, silence pressed in thick and unrelenting. He didn't even take off his blazer. He stood at the window, fingers curled at his sides. A daughter. He had a daughter. And she had his eyes. His voice, even he'd heard it in the way she projected on that stage. Her posture. Her deliberate way of pausing before important lines. She hadn't inherited his last name, but she had his cadence. That shook him. Preston turned from the window and walked toward his study, ignoring the untouched catering tray his housekeeper had left. On his desk, his phone buzzed. A text from Delilah. "Can't wait to toast tonight. Love you." He didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up a search bar. Typing Avery Jameson, College of Charleston brought up dozens of hits, Dean's List valedictorian community volunteer scholarship recipient. He clicked through a nonprofit website. Justice Table. Founded by Avery Jameson, a senior at the College of Charleston, this initiative provides legal advocacy resources for underserved families facing housing displacement. His heart sank. Housing displacement. He built luxury condos, developments with starting prices above $1.2 million, often on lots where older affordable homes had stood. He clicked a link. A video opened. Avery speaking into a handheld mic standing in front of a community center. No makeup, a ponytail. Her voice steady. Voice. "No one should lose their home because of profit. We can't keep pretending these communities don't matter." Preston leaned back, winded. It wasn't just that she was his daughter. It was who she had become, what she believed in. She was fighting against everything his empire stood for. He shut the laptop. A knock at the penthouse door broke the silence. He opened it to find Jude, his assistant, holding a manila folder. "You asked for background," Jude said, stepping inside. "Everything we could find: public records, education history, nonprofit tax filings." Preston took the folder, opened it, scanned. Born Avery Noel Jameson, mother Lorraine Angela Jameson, father not listed. No criminal history. Academic scholarships, first-gen college student, 2 part-time jobs through undergrad. Younger brother, address East Bay Street Unit 4B. Rented. Small older complex. Monthly cost $950. No contact with the Blackwell family on record. Preston shut the folder. "She's brilliant," he said, more to himself than to Jude. Jude hesitated. "She looks like you." Preston looked up sharply. Jude's tone wasn't challenging, just observing. Lorraine left right after she quit. Preston said quietly. "I thought maybe she didn't want anything. Maybe it hadn't happened." Jude shifted his weight. "She didn't ask for money, didn't sue. She raised her alone, sir. From the looks of it, she did a good job. That hit harder than it should have." Preston walked back toward the window. The harbor had started to glow in gold light. His voice was low. "I didn't even know. My mother said Lorraine wanted out, that she didn't want to fight for something temporary." Jude said nothing. Preston turned toward him. "She lied to me, didn't she?" "I wasn't there," Jude said. "But I've worked for you long enough to know you've trusted the wrong people before." The silence stretched between them. Preston finally exhaled. "Thanks. That'll be all." Jude nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Preston stood in the empty penthouse folder still in hand, and suddenly the space felt colder than usual. Quieter. As if the weight of all he had missed, the birthdays, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, was settling into the walls. He thought about the moment Avery had turned toward him. That brief flicker of connection. She had looked straight through him. Not hostile, not friendly, just curious. She didn't know. Or maybe she did, maybe she suspected. Maybe Lorraine had told her something just enough to build a wall. He sat down slowly at the edge of the leather couch. And then, as if on cue, the past pulled him backward. It was 22 years ago, late spring. Lorraine was in the kitchen of the Mount Pleasant estate, hair damp with steam apron dusted with flour. She was laughing at something he'd said about his father's dinner guests, her laughter soft, breathy, like the warmth of bread rising in the oven. He'd kissed her that night, not out of lust, out of escape. He hadn't meant to fall for her, but it was easy. Her goodness was quiet, not flashy. She never asked for anything. never chased his last name. When he told his mother about Lorraine, Cecilia's face had gone cold. "You are not throwing your future away for the help." He remembered the envelope. Thick. Heavy. Lorraine's eyes when she opened it, the way she said nothing and walked away. He hadn't stopped her. And now here he was, surrounded by empire. Alone. His phone buzzed again. This time a photo. Delilah in a white dress. She'd visited the florist for tonight's table arrangements. "See you soon. Can't wait to celebrate our forever." Preston stared at the screen, thumbs hovering, but no words came. Forever with Delilah had felt like a plan made on paper. Easy, strategic, comfortable. They got along. She made appearances well. Her father sat on a board with him. There were no hard questions, no ghosts until now. Now there was Lorraine. And Avery. He opened the folder again and pulled out the last page. A copy of Avery's Senior Honors Thesis, Gentrification and the Displacement of Community Identity in the American South. He read the first paragraph twice. It was sharp, articulate, precise, and it dismantled people like him. Preston rested his head in his hands. The central conflict wasn't just the past. It was the future. Avery's purpose was in direct tension with everything he had built. And she didn't even know he was her father. Not yet. But she would. He stood and walked back to the window as the sun dipped behind the line of sailboats. Somewhere out there, a young woman with his blood and her mother's fire had just stepped into the world believing she had done it all without him. And she was right. But it wasn't too late to tell her the truth. Was it? The scent of basil and garlic drifted through the small apartment kitchen as Lorraine stirred a simmering pot of tomato bisque. The space was tight, just big enough for one person to move around comfortably, and yet she found comfort in it. Everything had its place. Everything was hers. No one had ever handed her this kitchen or the roof over her head. She had earned every square inch of it. Avery's laughter floated in from the living room, followed by Miles's voice rising with exaggerated drama. "Mom, she's trying to make me watch another speech she gave. It was a TEDx talk," Miles Avery called back, amused. "And it got 80,000 views. I'm just saying not all of us need to relive your rise to world domination every time we open YouTube." Lorraine smiled to herself, shaking her head. "You two keep arguing, and you'll be eating cereal for dinner," she said, not turning from the stove. "I like cereal," Miles replied. Avery walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "He does. But don't worry, I bribed him with grilled cheese if he promised to stop being annoying. You know he won't hold that promise." "No, but the grilled cheese is happening anyway." Lorraine chuckled, then glanced sideways at her daughter. "You've been quiet since yesterday." Avery shrugged, though her eyes flicked away. It was a big day, that it was. Lorraine kept stirring, letting the silence stretch just enough. Finally, Avery said, "There was a man at the graduation." "He spoke to you?" Lorraine's hand paused mid-stir. "Just briefly. Barely noticeable." Avery saw it. "I saw you with him," Avery continued softly. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." Lorraine set the spoon down, gently wiped her hands on a dish towel, and turned to face her daughter. "I didn't expect to see him," she said. "It caught me off guard. Who was he?" Lorraine looked into Avery's face, the same stubborn chin, the same eyes. God, she saw him every time she looked at her daughter. And yet Avery had always been her own. Stronger, smarter, unafraid to speak truth in rooms full of power. "He was someone I knew a long time ago," Lorraine said carefully. "When I worked in Mount Pleasant, someone you worked for," Lorraine hesitated. "He was the son of the people I worked for, the Blackwells." Avery blinked. "Wait. Blackwell. As in Preston Blackwell?" Lorraine gave a tight nod. "Yes. Avery leaned back slightly, her brow furrowing. That was him. Lorraine folded the towel slowly, precisely. Yes. What did he want? He didn't say. He just stood there. I think he recognized you. The air in the kitchen changed. The laughter from the other room faded under the weight of something heavier. Why would he recognize me? Avery asked. Lorraine didn't answer right away. Her eyes shimmered with a quiet conflict. I think he knows, she said finally. Or he's starting to. Avery crossed her arms again, jaw tightening. So he really is. I never told him, Lorraine cut in. Her voice was steady, but the pain ran beneath every word. When I left for good. He didn't come after me. And I didn't want you growing up with half-truths or hope for something he wouldn't give. Avery's throat worked around a knot of emotion. You didn't think I deserved to know. I thought you deserved to grow up free, Lorraine said. Free of waiting on someone who chose comfort over courage. The words settled between them like a dropped plate. I needed answers, Mom Avery whispered. And now they're falling out of the sky, and I don't know what to do with them. Lorraine stepped forward and gently touched Avery's arm. You've built your life without him. You've made yourself into someone strong and good. Nothing about who you are depends on who your father is. Avery looked away, her voice low. But I still wanted to know. In the hallway, Miles called, Is dinner ready? Or did you two burn it again while talking about life? Lorraine exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. In 5 minutes, she said loud enough to carry. Avery turned back toward the stove. You want me to get the bowls? Yeah, Lorraine said, her voice softer now. That'd be great. They worked in silence for a few moments. Familiar, comfortable. But under the quiet, a current had shifted. Later that night, after Miles was in bed and the dishes were done, Avery sat on the couch, laptop open. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then finally typed, Preston Blackwell Charleston. Articles filled the screen. Forbes, Southern Living, real estate trade magazines. Blackwell Estates was massive. Properties all over the Lowcountry. Condos with rooftop pools. Historic building restorations. She clicked on an interview clip. Preston sat in front of a marble fireplace, legs crossed, voice calm and controlled. I believe legacy is about stewardship, he was saying. It's about building something that lasts, that elevates the city and honors our history. Avery stared at him. She looked so much like him, it hurt. She closed the laptop. Meanwhile, across town, Preston sat in his office, overlooking the marina. The dinner at the Harbor Club had been canceled. He'd told Delilah he wasn't feeling well. She'd sounded concerned, but he didn't say more. He was staring at the photo Jude had printed, Avery holding a plaque standing in front of her non-profit storefront. Smiling, radiant, determined. He hadn't called Lorraine. He didn't know what to say. He was afraid, though, he wouldn't use that word. He was a man of strategy, timing, preparation. But this required something he'd buried a long time ago. He picked up his phone. Scrolled to Lorraine's number, which Jude had found through a vendor registry. He stared at it. Did she hate him? Probably. Did she have the right? Absolutely. He set the phone down. It vibrated instantly with a new message from his mother. We need to talk. I hear you saw her. This ends now. Preston stared at the screen. Then very slowly he turned the phone face down. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the truth that Lorraine had raised their daughter without him, or the fact that he still had time to do something about it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The gallery buzzed with soft conversation and the clink of wine glasses. Abstract canvases lined the exposed brick walls, their colors muted by the evening light filtering through high windows. In one corner, a string quartet played a gentle arrangement of Vivaldi, adding a polished hum to the background. Lorraine moved between tables with practiced ease, her catering team quietly efficient behind her. She checked the presentation of the canapes, adjusted a vase of peonies, and smiled politely when greeted by donors she didn't recognize, but had fed more times than she could count. She wasn't supposed to be nervous. It was just another fundraiser, another upscale event with Charleston's elite pretending to care about causes they didn't live with. But tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. She caught her reflection in the tall mirror near the wine station. Sleek black blouse-tailored slacks, a small silver pin above her heart in the shape of a magnolia bloom. She looked calm, professional, invisible the way she preferred to be in rooms like this, but her chest felt tight. Avery was here somewhere, volunteering, hosting, smiling. The gallery had invited her nonprofit to speak before the auction began. Lorraine had watched her daughter rehearse all week, voice-steady message clear. And now, as guests continued to arrive, Lorraine caught herself scanning the room too often. She knew why, and she hated that she knew. 10 minutes later, she saw him. Preston stood near the bar dressed in a navy suit that fit too perfectly. His expression was composed, but his eyes, those same eyes Avery had inherited, moved the room with intent. He hadn't seen her yet. Lorraine's breath caught. Her instinct told her to leave. Just walk to the back into the kitchen, pretend this was nothing. But she didn't move. Instead, she watched him. He didn't belong here. Not because of the clothes or the money. That part fit. But there was something in his stillness. A tension around the mouth. The way he held his glass but didn't drink. He wasn't mingling. He was searching. He was looking for her. Avery appeared beside the gallery owner, beaming in a pale lavender dress clipboard in hand. Lorraine's heart swelled and ached at the same time. She looked so grown. Preston's eyes found Avery across the room. He froze. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, but Lorraine saw it, that quiet jolt, recognition, pain, pride, and something deeper. She turned quickly, stepping behind a floral arrangement out of view. Her hands trembled. She didn't expect him to come here. Not so soon. Not like this. She ducked into the hallway that led to the gallery's back office, hoping to gather herself, but the sound of footsteps behind her stopped her cold. Lorraine. His voice was low, familiar. It slipped into her bones like a memory she didn't want to hold. She turned. He looked the same and not at all. Older, sharper, but his presence was still undeniable. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. "I heard Avery was speaking tonight. I wanted to see her, to see you." Lorraine folded her arms. "You shouldn't be here." "I didn't come to make a scene," Preston said. "I just needed to know." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Lorraine noticed. "There's nothing to know," she said. "She's not yours to claim. She looks like me. She is like you. Ambitious. Brilliant. But everything else, her kindness, her drive, her strength, that's not from you. That's from being raised by someone who stayed." Preston stepped closer. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't. My mother told me you left because you didn't want the complication." Lorraine blinked. "And you believed her? I was 24. Naive. Scared. Stupid." "No," she said, voice cool. "You were a man who chose comfort. And you don't get to rewrite that now just because you're uncomfortable." A long silence stretched between them. Then he asked, "Does she know?" Lorraine's lips pressed together. "Not everything. I want to talk to her. She doesn't need you showing up and turning her life inside out. I'm not here to take anything." Preston said softer now, I just want a chance to what Lorraine cut in. Explain why you weren't there when she was sick at 7 and terrified it was her fault, or when she cried the night of senior prom because her date canceled and I couldn't afford the dress she wanted. You want to explain why she built herself from nothing while you were buying beachfront property to bulldoze. Preston swallowed hard. I wasn't there, I know that, but I want to be now. She shook her head. It's too late. The office door opened at the end of the hall, and Avery's voice floated in. Mom, they're asking if you have the second tray of… She stopped. Her eyes flicked from Lorraine to Preston. What's going on? Neither of them spoke. Avery stepped forward, her expression confused. You're the man from graduation? Preston gave a small nod. Yes. Avery turned to Lorraine. You know him? Lorraine opened her mouth, but no words came. Preston's voice was quiet. Avery, I'm Preston. She raised an eyebrow. Okay. Lorraine stepped in quickly. He was someone I knew a long time ago. Avery looked at them both, suspicion blooming. Why are you talking back here? What's going on? Preston looked at Lorraine, silently asking. Lorraine's hands clenched. Her heart was hammering. But this wasn't her moment anymore. It was Avery's. She deserves to know, Preston said gently. Lorraine closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them, her daughter was watching her with a mixture of fear and frustration. Mom Lorraine's voice was a whisper. He's your father. Avery stared at her, then at Preston. Silence fell like a curtain. Avery stepped back. Just one step. But it felt like a chasm opened between them all. I need to go, she said quietly, voice tight. They're waiting for me. She turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Preston exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Lorraine watched her daughter disappear into the crowd, her own heart breaking in a way she thought it had already done too many times. She wasn't ready, Lorraine said softly. Preston's voice was barely audible. Neither was I. The next morning the world looked exactly the same. The sunlight still filtered softly through the kitchen window. The coffee still brewed with its familiar earthy scent. Miles still complained from the hallway about not being able to find clean socks, even though they were in the same drawer they'd always been in. But for Avery, everything had shifted. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. Her hair was still pulled into last night's loose bun. She hadn't slept. Not really. She'd laid in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the storm that had cracked open behind a gallery wall. Preston Blackwell was her father. She kept hearing the words in her mother's voice. Quiet. Waited. Almost apologetic. He's your father. Just like that. And what had she done? She'd walked away. Now her thoughts were a tangle of regret, anger, curiosity, betrayal. Are you okay? Miles appeared in the doorway, a slice of toast in hand, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Avery looked up, startled. Yeah, just tired. You didn't say much when you got home last night. She hesitated. It was a lot. He stepped further into the room. Was it him? The man from graduation? Avery's breath caught. Yeah. Miles sat across from her, biting into the toast, chewing slowly. So he asked after a moment. So what? What did he say? Not much, she admitted. But Mom did. His brows lifted slightly and he didn't speak. He's our dad. Miles blinked. Avery expected him to say something sharp to ask why no one had told him, but instead he just nodded once slowly, as if he'd already known. I figured. Avery stared. What I mean? Look at you. Look at him. You two are like a split screen. He shrugged. I thought maybe. You already knew. I didn't, her voice cracked. And I'm still not sure what to do with it. Miles was quiet for a beat, then leaned forward. Are you mad at Mom? No, Avery said too quickly. Yes, I don't know. I get it. She did what she had to do. But it still feels like I've been walking around my whole life with a question no one thought I deserved the answer to. She probably thought she was protecting you. She was. But she was also protecting him. Miles looked away, chewing the inside of his cheek. Are you going to talk to him? I don't know. He nodded again and stood. You want me to be mad for you? That broke a smile from her just a little. You're already mad at everyone all the time. Yeah, he said, grabbing his water bottle. But this time I've got a reason. When the door closed behind him, Avery leaned back in her chair, eyes drifting to the window. The neighborhood outside was quiet, bathed in spring green. Nothing about it hinted at the kind of questions unraveling inside her chest. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She hesitated, then tapped open the message. Avery, I hope this isn't inappropriate. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the way I showed up. For all the years I didn't. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to know you. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Preston. She stared at the message. Simple, careful, not demanding. Still, it made her throat tighten. She locked her phone, set it aside, and stood. She needed space, and she knew exactly where to find it. The small office of Justice Table was tucked inside an old converted storefront near the east side. The place smelled faintly of printer toner and floor polish. The walls were lined with shelves holding donated books, pamphlets, and resource guides. Avery stepped inside, dropped her bag on the desk, and took a deep breath. Here she was in control. Here she wasn't someone's daughter or someone's secret. She was just herself. Morning, came a voice from the back. Genevieve Rhodes stepped out from the hallway holding a folder and a coffee. Her dark hair was swept into a knot, and she wore sneakers with her business dress. Her usual contradiction. I figured you might stop by today, she said. Avery gave her a tired look. You knew I had a hunch. I was there last night. Avery blinked. I didn't want to interfere, Genevieve said, setting the folder down. But I saw you leave the hallway, and I saw Preston standing there afterward looking like someone had kicked the foundation out from under him. Avery swallowed. Why didn't anyone tell me Genevieve sat on the edge of the desk, crossing her legs? Because the truth is complicated. And when people are young and scared and surrounded by powerful parents who measure love in money, they make mistakes. Avery tilted her head. You're his sister. I am. Then why are you here? Genevieve's smile was faint. Because I know what it feels like to grow up in the Blackwell house and still feel invisible. Because I know your mom. And because I knew. One day this would come for both of you. Avery stared at her hands. He sent me a message. What did he say? That he's sorry. That he wants to know me. That he's not asking for anything. Genevieve's voice was gentle. Do you believe him? I don't know. Genevieve nodded. Well, that's honest. More honest than most people would be. They sat in silence for a while. Then Genevieve added, You don't owe him forgiveness. But if you want answers, he's the only one who can give them to you. Avery leaned forward, her voice lower now. He built his empire while we were counting every dollar for rent. He was out there shaking hands with city council while we were helping people they ignored. And now he wants to show up and say what, oops? No, Genevieve said. He wants to say, I'm sorry. Whether it matters is up to you. Avery stood wrapping her arms around herself. I'm angry, good Genevieve said. You should be, but I'm also curious. That's human. Avery turned to the window. Outside, a father was lifting his toddler into the back seat of a car, both of them laughing at something. Avery closed her eyes. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, she whispered. Genevieve's reply was quiet. There's no supposed to. There's only what you need. And maybe when you're ready you can ask him what he needed all those years ago that kept him away. Avery didn't answer. She just stood there, the silence thick with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answers to, and the growing weight of knowing that either way nothing would ever be the same again. The morning air was thick with the promise of rain, as Preston sat in his parked car along East Bay Street, staring up at the modest brick apartment complex across from a row of blooming crepe myrtles. His hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving. He'd been sitting there for 12 minutes, watching, waiting, debating. Avery lived here. He'd memorized the address the second Jude handed him the file, but he hadn't imagined coming. Not like this. Not unannounced. Not uncertain. But the silence was unbearable. She hadn't replied to his message, not a word, and it gnawed at him more than he'd ever admit. He wasn't used to silence, not in boardrooms, not in relationships, not in life. But Avery's silence, it held weight. It made him feel like the uninvited guest at a party everyone else had earned the right to attend. Still, he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Just as he leaned forward to start the engine, the building's front door opened. Avery stepped outside. She didn't see him. She was alone. Headphones in tote bag slung over one shoulder, a coffee cup balanced in her hand. Her steps were purposeful, confident. Her hair was pinned back loosely and she wore a dark green jacket over jeans and a plain white tee. She looked like her mother in motion, but every bit her own person. Preston's heart ached. He couldn't stay in the car. By the time she reached the corner, he was already walking. Avery. She stopped mid-step, turned, their eyes met. She pulled out her headphones slowly, like bracing herself. "I wasn't expecting you," she said. "I wasn't planning to come." "But I didn't know how else to," he stopped. "I wanted to see you, to ask if you'd talk." Avery's expression didn't change. "You could have waited for a reply. I didn't want to pressure you. I just didn't want to disappear again." She folded her arms, the coffee cup cradled in one hand. "You never showed up to begin with." He flinched. It was honest. And deserved. "I don't expect forgiveness," Preston said carefully. "I only want a chance to answer whatever questions you have, even the ones you don't know how to ask yet." Avery studied him. People passed around them, Charleston locals walking dogs or rushing to work. But they were in their own still world. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Nothing," he said. "That's the truth. I want to give you something if you'll let me. Not money, not control, just the truth. And maybe eventually a relationship that's on your terms." She looked down, thumb tracing the lip of the cup. "What truth?" she said. Preston's voice lowered. "That I didn't know. That when your mother left, I let fear decide for me. I didn't fight. I told myself she didn't want a life with someone like me, and that lie was easier than admitting I was a coward." Avery looked back up. "And now I see you. I see what I missed. And I'm not looking away again." She didn't speak right away. Then quietly she asked, "What would you have done differently?" Preston exhaled. "Everything. I would have left the house, followed her, fought my mother. I would have shown up on your birthdays, held you through hard nights, taught you how to parallel park, bragged about your graduation like it was the Oscars." Avery's eyes shimmered just slightly. He went on, voice more unsteady now. "But I didn't. I didn't do any of those things. And the truth is, I don't deserve a place in your life just because we share blood. I only came to say that I'm here if you want me. If you don't, if you never speak to me again, I'll respect that too." A pause. Then Avery asked, "Why now?" Because watching you walk across that stage was the most humbling moment of my life, and I couldn't let it be the last." A long silence followed. Then she said, "You built luxury condos on the same street where families I tutor are being evicted." Preston didn't flinch. "I know. And you stood next to mayors and smiled while people like my mom scrubbed your family's floors." He nodded. "I did. And you think one emotional speech makes this okay? No," he said. "Nothing makes it okay. I just want to be someone you don't regret knowing." She looked away, eyes brimming. "I don't know if I have the space for you." "That's fair. I don't know if I want to." He swallowed hard. "Even more fair." She stood there for another long moment. Then quietly she said, "But I think I want to ask you one thing." "Anything." She looked at him with steady, searching eyes. "Why did your mother hate my mom so much?" That question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Preston's face shifted. "Because Lorraine didn't follow the rules. She didn't stay small. She loved freely without asking permission, and that threatened everything my mother built her pride on." Avery's lip trembled. "Did you love her?" Preston didn't hesitate. "I did. I still do." The tension cracked something between them. Avery blinked hard, looking away again. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel," she whispered. "You don't have to feel anything today," Preston said gently. "Or tomorrow, or ever. This is yours to carry however you need." A car honked in the distance. A dog barked down the street. Life moved on while the two of them stood tangled in time. Avery finally spoke again. "I'm late for a meeting." Preston nodded, stepping back. "Of course," she hesitated. "I'll think about what you said." He smiled. "That's all I can ask." She didn't say goodbye. She just turned headphones dangling from her fingers and walked away. Preston watched her until she disappeared around the corner. Then for the first time in years, he let himself feel the weight of everything he'd lost, and the flicker of something he hadn't dared hope for, a second chance. The air inside the Blackwell Foundation's downtown headquarters was cool and meticulously still. It smelled faintly of fresh lilies and expensive paper intentional details Preston had approved years ago to project elegance and control. Everything was curated, everything except the knot in his stomach. He stood near the window in the executive conference room, staring down at the people on King Street. His phone sat on the table behind him. No new messages. Avery hadn't reached out. He had no expectation that she would not quickly. But silence had a way of turning time heavy. Behind him, the door opened. Preston Jude's voice was tentative. Preston turned. "Come in." Jude stepped in, carrying a small envelope. "This came to the front desk this morning. No return address." Preston raised an eyebrow, accepting the envelope. It was simple, unmarked. He opened it carefully and pulled out a single folded page. Typed. Brief. "You want to understand me? Come see what I've built. Saturday. 3 p.m. No name. No signature." But he knew. "Avery," he murmured. Jude nodded once. "You going?" Preston looked back at the page, something flickering behind his eyes. "I have to." That Saturday rain clouds hovered but never quite broke. The streets were sticky with southern heat, and the parking lot outside the Justice Table Community Center was nearly full when Preston pulled in, dressed not in his usual tailored suit, but in a crisp navy shirt and slacks. He hesitated before getting out. Inside, voices hummed, children laughing, adults in soft conversation, the faint clang of metal chairs being set up. He stepped through the front door and froze. It wasn't a nonprofit. It was a movement. The room was alive. Flyers lined the bulletin board tenant rights workshops, job fairs, food distribution days. Volunteers bustled between folding tables set with donated books and resource kits. On one wall, a mural was in progress, bright strokes of color forming the outline of hands holding a house. Then he saw her. Avery stood near the back, helping an elderly woman carry a tray of lemonade toward a long table of guests. Her laughter rang out, genuine, unpolished warm. She hadn't seen him yet. Genevieve appeared at his side, holding a clipboard. "You showed," she said without looking at him. "I said I would." She smiled faintly. "You clean up well for community hours." "I didn't come to make a statement." "No," she said, finally turning to him. "You came because you're curious. And maybe deep down because you're tired of building things no one remembers once the ribbon is cut." Preston gave her a sidelong look. "You always this direct," Genevieve sipped her coffee. "Only when I think someone might still be salvageable." Before he could reply, Avery walked over. Her gaze landed on him with calm clarity. "You came." "I did. Follow me." She led him past the crowd through a side door into a small classroom-turned office. The walls were covered in charts, post-it notes, printed maps of neighborhoods with pins in various colors. She sat on the edge of the desk. "This is where we run our housing advocacy." Preston scanned the room. "All this from scratch, every bit of it," she said. "Donations, volunteer hours, grants. Some of the people you just walked past live in buildings you helped design. Some of them can't afford to stay there anymore." He turned to her. "I know. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately." Avery looked at him, her voice steady but sharp. "We don't need charity, Preston. We need change. I'm not here to write a check." "Good," she said. "Because I wouldn't take it." The silence stretched between them. Then she added quieter. "Now, you said you loved my mother." "I did." "Then why didn't you fight for her?" Preston didn't flinch. "Because I was afraid that love wouldn't be enough. And because I'd been raised to believe that protecting my name was more important than protecting her." Avery looked away, jaw tightening. He stepped forward, voice low. "And that's the greatest regret of my life." A long pause. She looked back at him. "What do you regret more, losing her or never knowing me?" The question knocked the wind from him. "I regret all of it," he said. "But missing your childhood. That's the wound I can't dress up with money or buildings. That's the ache that doesn't fade." Avery's eyes glistened. She didn't blink. Preston took a breath. "I want to help, not by fixing, not by owning, just by showing up. If there's space for me to do that." Her voice cracked slightly. "It's not that simple." "I know. I don't even know how to look at you yet. You don't have to decide today," he said. "Or next week. I'll be here. I'll keep showing up." She nodded slowly. Then she reached for a folder on the desk and handed it to him. "Then start by reading this. It's our case files, families being pushed out of neighborhoods you helped gentrify. If you want to help, start by understanding the problem you're part of." He accepted it without hesitation. "Deal." Her lips twitched just the faintest trace of something not quite a smile, but close. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door slowly creaking open. Preston sat alone in his penthouse. The folder Avery had given him spread open on the marble kitchen island. The city lights of Charleston flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, but his eyes were fixed on the pages in front of him. Stories of families displaced elderly tenants who'd lived in the same building for 40 years now facing rent hikes that would force them out. He read every page twice, some 3 times. Each file was more than data. Each name, each story chipped away at the carefully constructed version of success he'd spent decades building. And for the first time in years, He felt the edges of his legacy cracking beneath the weight of truth. Preston had been raised to believe that progress was profit, that buildings mattered more than the people inside them. That legacy was measured in plaques and newspaper features, not in whose kitchen lights stayed on when the rent was due. Avery had handed him a mirror, and what he saw wasn't flattering. The elevator chimed softly behind him. He turned expecting Jude or the building concierge, but the moment the doors slid open, he froze. Lorraine stood there, wind lifting the edges of her jacket face, calm but unreadable. He blinked. Lorraine. She stepped in slowly, holding a small canvas bag and an envelope. I called Jude. He said you were here. I didn't want to just show up, but you're always welcome, he said quickly, voice softer than he meant it to be. She nodded, once her eyes drifting to the folder on the counter. I assume she gave you homework? I'm failing, he said with a half smile. Lorraine didn't return it. Instead, she walked to the counter and placed the envelope in front of him. I thought you should have this. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, faded a little worn around the edges. A newborn baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Her eyes closed, tiny fist curled against her cheek. My sister took that, Lorraine said, her voice quiet. The day Avery came home from the hospital. Preston stared at it, his throat tightening. I missed all of it, he murmured. You did. She sat across from him, folding her hands on the counter. And I've spent the last 21 years building a life without you in it. I know. I raised her to be everything I never had the chance to become. Lorraine. Continued eyes not moving from his. Strong. Brave. Smart enough to ask hard questions and kind enough to care about the answers. I didn't want her growing up thinking the world owed her anything. She doesn't act like it does. No, Lorraine said. She doesn't. The silence was heavy, but not angry. Just honest. She's been asking questions, Preston said after a long pause, about why I stayed away, why I didn't fight. And what do you tell her? The truth, he said. That I was weak, that I let other people decide who I should be, that I was a coward. Lorraine looked down, then back up. You weren't the only one afraid, Preston. I left because I knew what staying meant. Your mother would have made me small, quiet, something you could manage. She did that to everyone. I wasn't willing to let her do it to Avery. He nodded, voice rough. I don't blame you. She studied him, something softening in her face. You're trying, she said. I see that. I want to do more than try. You don't get to fix 20 years in 20 days. I'm not looking for shortcuts. She tilted her head. Then what are you looking for? Preston exhaled slowly, looking around his immaculate, gleaming kitchen. Something real. Something I didn't build with my last name or a contract. I want my daughter to know me, not the version people write about. Lorraine looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then finally she stood. I didn't come here for apologies, she said. I came to see if you were still the man I remembered, or if you finally became the one you promised to be. Preston stood too. And what do you think? She paused at the door. I think the man I remember wouldn't have read those files. He wouldn't have asked what the people needed. He would have asked what the press needed. She looked over her shoulder. I think this version of you still has a long way to go. And then with a nod, she stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, Preston turned back to the photograph on the counter. The tiny bundle, that soft, wrinkled face, his daughter. That night, he made a call. Jude. I need a meeting scheduled with the City Housing Board. No press, just their core members. I want to listen. The next morning, Avery walked into Justice Table to find a note taped to her office door. It was folded neatly, unsigned, But she knew who it was from the moment she read the first line, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just your time. And a chance to be held accountable on your terms." Inside the envelope was a list, not of excuses, of names, developers, landlords, partners in his own network, and a sentence at the bottom. "Tell me where to start." Avery stared at the paper hands, shaking just slightly. For the first time, it didn't feel like he was trying to step into her life with a spotlight. It felt like he was ready to step into the quiet and learn. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just folded the note, placed it in her drawer, and opened her laptop. But something inside her, some long-caged thing, had shifted. The door she'd cracked open was still there. And maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to shut again. The sun had barely lifted above the Charleston rooftops when Avery unlocked the front door of Justice Table. The early light spilled across the hardwood floors, painting soft, golden patches onto the old, paint-chipped walls. She paused, coffee in hand, as if the quiet itself was asking her to breathe before the day truly began. Something was different. Not in the building. Not even in the air. It was inside her. She still didn't know what to call it, this cautious loosening in her chest. But ever since she found that note, ever since Preston had handed her not a defense but a list of names and a line that didn't demand anything, she'd felt it. He wasn't pushing. He was waiting. And for the first time since he appeared in her life, that didn't make her angry. It made her think. She walked past the main hall toward the back office, stopping when she saw Lorraine standing in the kitchen stirring sugar into her tea. "Morning," Avery said. Lorraine looked up, blinking once. "You're here early." "So are you. I couldn't sleep," her mother admitted. Avery leaned against the counter. "Me either." They were quiet for a moment. The teaspoon clinked softly in the mug. Then Lorraine asked, "Did you read the note?" Avery nodded. "Yeah. What did you think? I think he's finally listening." Lorraine studied her daughter. "Are you ready to talk to him again?" Avery hesitated. Maybe not about the past, but maybe about the future. Lorraine nodded slowly, as if that answer both surprised her and didn't. "Just take your time," she said. "Don't give away pieces of yourself out of guilt or hope. Do it because you want to." Avery smiled faintly. "I will." She started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Would it be weird? "If I invited him to the town hall next week," Lorraine looked at her for a long moment. Then simply she said, "It would be bold." Avery laughed quietly. "Guess I get that from you." The rest of the day moved quickly. Emails, logistics, a few drop-ins from clients needing legal advice or rent advocacy help. But just after lunch, the energy in the building shifted again. Genevieve walked in. Avery looked up from her desk. "You're early." Genevieve dropped her bag on the chair. "There's someone I think you should meet." Avery blinked. "Okay." A moment later, a woman stepped into the office behind her mid-60s silver hair in a bun, her expression cautious but curious. She wore a tan cardigan and carried a small purse tucked under her arm, like it held something fragile. Genevieve said gently, "Avery, this is Della Harmon. She used to work as a housekeeper at the Blackwell estate." "Before your mom." Avery stood quickly. "Mrs. Harmon, hi. Please have a seat." Della smiled softly. "Thank you, sweetheart." Genevieve sat beside her but said nothing more, letting Della take her time. The older woman looked at Avery with kind but searching eyes. "I knew your mother. I knew of you. She never let me meet you directly, said it wasn't safe." Avery tilted her head. "Safe." Della sighed. "The house was complicated. That family was watched. Everything was politics. Lorraine was too proud to let you be paraded around like a problem." "She protected me," Avery said quietly. "She loved you," Della corrected. And she carried you through that storm with nothing but grit and instinct. Avery's throat tightened. Della reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your mother wrote this to me years ago after she left. I kept it all this time. Figured one day maybe it'd find its way to you? Hands shaking slightly, Avery opened the letter. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting familiar and slanted. Della, thank you for the kindness you showed me when no one else would look me in the eye. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know I have to get out. I have to make something of this life for the sake of my child. I won't let the Blackwell name define us. Pray for us, and tell anyone who asks that I'm not afraid. Lorraine Avery blinked hard, lips pressed tight. She was scared, Della said softly. But she was also brave in ways people don't understand, unless they've had to be. Ivory looked up. Why now? Why come forward now? Because I heard what you're doing here, because I heard Preston's back, and because if you're going to move forward, you deserve to know the strength you came from. Genevieve added quietly. Sometimes people think starting over means forgetting, but sometimes it means remembering too. Avery stared at the letter. For so long, she'd built her strength on survival, on pushing forward. But here was proof on old paper in her mother's own hand that she wasn't alone in that. She came from resilience, from women who carried burdens without losing their voice. And now maybe she could build something not from pain but from legacy. Thank you, Mrs. Harmon, she said, her voice full. Della reached out and patted her hand. You're doing just fine, baby girl. Better than fine. As the two women left, Avery sat back in her chair, eyes drifting to the wall, where a photo of her team smiled beneath the words, "Build with purpose." Her phone buzzed. A text. From Preston. If you're still open to it, I'd like to join you at the town hall, even if it's just to listen. Avery stared at the screen. Then slowly she typed. You can come. Just bring open ears and no suits. The reply came seconds later. Done. And thank you. Truly. Avery set the phone down, exhaled, and looked out the window. There were still questions. Still pain. Still history to untangle. But there was also this path forward. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted to walk it. The town hall buzzed with a quiet tension just beneath the surface, one of those energies you could feel before anyone said a word. Folding chairs filled the room in tight rows. A makeshift podium stood at the front, draped with a banner that read, Charleston Housing Forum Stories, Struggle Solutions. Avery stood in the back, arms crossed, watching as people trickled in. Residents, advocates, a few city officials, even a reporter with a notepad. Her heart beat harder than she wanted to admit. Not because of the crowd. Because Preston was coming. She'd told him to come casual. No suits, no polished rehearsals. She needed him to listen, not lead. And she wasn't sure what scared her more, that he'd disappoint her or that he wouldn't. Lorraine came up beside her, handing her a bottle of water. You okay? Avery nodded. Just a little sick to my stomach. Her mother gave her a look. You're not here to impress anyone. You're here to tell the truth. Avery sighed. Yeah, but sometimes the truth isn't easy to say out loud. That's why it matters. Across the room, the door opened again. Preston stepped inside. He wore jeans, a soft button-down shirt, no tie, no entourage, just him. Avery watched him pause, scanning the crowd, not for the spotlight, but for her. Their eyes met. He didn't wave. He didn't smile too big. He simply nodded. A quiet kind of acknowledgement. And she felt it, a thread pulling tight between them. Genevieve walked over and cleared her throat, breaking the moment. You ready? Avery blinked. Yeah, let's get this started. An hour later, the town hall was in full swing. One by one, neighbors stood to speak. A single mother talked about being priced out of her building after it was bought by a national developer. A retired teacher described watching every home on her block turn into vacation rentals. A maintenance worker shared that he was living in his car while managing a building full of luxury condos. Every story was raw, personal, unfiltered. And Preston sat in the second row silent, listening. Not once did he flinch or check his phone. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look for the exit. He just sat there taking in what decades of silence had created. When it was Avery's turn to speak, the room quieted. She stood at the front, palms pressed to the podium, letting the pause stretch just long enough to make everyone lean in. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. "I mean that literally. I was born into a story no one thought would make it this far. My mom worked in the Blackwell house. She scrubbed marble floors while the family hosted fundraisers. She raised me in a 2-bedroom apartment where the ceiling leaked, and sometimes the hot water didn't work. But we had something that couldn't be bought: dignity." Her voice cracked just slightly, but she steadied herself. "And now I work in housing advocacy. Not because I dreamed of it growing up, but because I had to. Because I watched too many families get pushed out of their neighborhoods. Because I saw developers who never once set foot on our blocks decide how much a family's roots were worth. And because I realized that real change doesn't come from power, it comes from persistence." She looked straight at Preston, and from people who are finally ready to own what they ignored for too long. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I'm not asking for miracles," she said, turning back to the room. "I'm asking for momentum, for honesty, for accountability, and for a future where kids like I don't have to fight this hard just to stay where they belong." She stepped back. The room broke into applause, not thunderous, not performative, just steady, sincere. Preston stayed seated. His hands were clasped, eyes glassy. After the meeting, people lingered in small clusters, talking, shaking hands, sharing information. Avery walked outside to get air, the humidity wrapping around her like a warm blanket. Preston followed a few steps behind. He didn't speak until they were alone beneath a street lamp. "I heard you," he said quietly. She looked at him. "Did you understand me? I think I'm starting to." A long pause. "I won't pretend that I can undo any of it," he added. "But I want to be part of what comes next on your terms. No headlines, no ribbon cuttings." Avery searched his face. "Why now?" "Because for the first time I feel like a person again. Not a brand. Not a name." Her eyes softened. "I used to think I could build my way out of guilt," Preston continued. "But what I really needed to do was listen to it. Let it change me." Avery's voice was low. "People don't change overnight." "I don't want to," he said. "I want to change for real." A gust of wind lifted her hair. She tucked a strand behind her ear. Then gently she asked, "Would you be willing to come to one of our tenant meetings? Not to talk, just to sit, to understand what this is day after day." He didn't even hesitate. Yes. And there it was again, that thread, tighter now, stronger. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of something that could be, a new blueprint, not for buildings, for trust. The tenant meeting was held in the cramped back room of the community library where the fluorescent lights hummed and the chairs didn't match. But the room was full of voices of stories of raw edges people rarely revealed in polite company. Preston sat in the far corner, not at the table, not beside Avery, just in a metal folding chair near the back wall, his notepad in his lap, listening. Avery hadn't introduced him. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was. They glanced at him, some with curiosity, others with open skepticism. One woman whispered, That's the Blackwell guy, and didn't bother to lower her voice. But no one asked him to leave. That was enough. Tonight's meeting was focused on a development on Rutledge Avenue, 2 aging apartment buildings about to be sold. If the deal went through, 38 families would be displaced. No relocation plan, no rent caps. Just a quiet transfer of ownership that would shift the ground beneath people's lives. An older man named Marcus spoke first. I've lived there since '89, raised 2 kids in that place. My wife passed in that apartment. I've paid my rent on time every month. And now they say I gotta leave 'cause they want to install granite counters. A murmur ran through the room. A young mother added, "My son just started 1st grade. If we get forced out, he loses his school, his friends, everything he's finally feeling safe in." Genevieve wrote names, dates, action items on the whiteboard. Avery listened, asking follow-ups, encouraging details. She wasn't just leading the meeting, she was in it. She knew these people. Their stories weren't case files. They were neighbors. And Preston just watched, listened, wrote. But it hit him he had built buildings that looked like progress. And now he saw the faces of the people progress had pushed out. When the meeting ended, most people lingered, chatting, hugging, swapping information. Preston stood slowly, unsure if he should approach Avery. She beat him to it. "You heard all of it?" she asked, walking over. "Every word." She crossed her arms. "Still feel like this is something you want to be part of?" He nodded. Even more than before. Her expression was unreadable. "You didn't flinch." "I did," he said. "Inside." She studied him. "Good. Because if this isn't hard, you're not doing it right." He smiled, not because it was funny, but because she was right. Then something shifted in her face, just slightly. Her voice dropped lower. "There's something I didn't tell you." His smile faded. "Okay." I found something she said. A document from years ago, buried deep in city records. My mom's lease at the time, it was supposed to be protected under a housing covenant. But someone lobbied to have that section of the neighborhood rezoned. Quietly. Preston's heart skipped. "And the name on the lobbying records," she said. "It wasn't just your mother's. Yours was on there too." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Avery stepped closer. "You signed off on the zoning change that raised our rent. That forced us out." Preston's breath caught. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Avery, I swear I signed a lot of papers back then. I didn't read everyone. I trusted my legal team to." "That's the point," she said, voice sharp. "You didn't look. You didn't ask. You just signed." His face flushed with shame. "I was young and ambitious and scared of losing my place at the table, and we lost our home." Her words hit harder than a slap. The room had emptied out around them. It was just the two of them now, standing under flickering fluorescent lights, truths unraveling between them. "I'm not asking you to fix it," she said, quieter now. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to feel what it's like to carry consequences you never asked for." Preston nodded slowly, his voice raw. "I do. I feel it. And if there's any way I can help you undo the damage, I will." She looked at him for a long time. Then finally she said, "Then start with the Rutledge property. The developer bidding on it, one of your old partners. Convince him to back out, or buy it yourself and freeze the rent." Preston didn't flinch. "Done. No press. No name on a plaque. Just people in their homes," he said. "I promise." For the first time that night, something unspoken passed between them. Not warmth, not yet, but a crack in the wall. And through it, something almost like trust. Almost. The following Tuesday, a low country storm rolled in one of those moody, slow-moving rains that washed over Charleston, like it was trying to rinse out something old. The city breathed a little deeper when it rained like this. Avery did too. She stood by the window of the justice table office, arms crossed, watching the sidewalk slick with water. The building was quiet, just the hum of the dehumidifier in the hallway and the distant echo of someone restocking the supply closet. It was rare to get a moment of stillness. A quiet knock tapped on the doorframe behind her. She turned. Preston. He wasn't dressed in business clothes again, just jeans and a windbreaker, hair a little wet from the walk. He looked tired, but not defeated. "I spoke to Connor Mason," he said, stepping inside slowly. She arched a brow. "The developer." He nodded. "We go way back. I told him to drop the Rutledge bid. No strings. I didn't ask for a buyout or a stake." Avery crossed her arms tighter. "And he wasn't thrilled," Preston admitted. "But I reminded him of a few things he owed me. He's out." She blinked, caught off guard. "Just like that, I also bought the property myself," he added, voice softer now. "Under a community housing trust. The deed transfers next week." Avery stared at him, stunned. "Rents will stay fixed. No evictions. We're bringing in a non-profit management group to do maintenance and repairs. Local folks." She didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, quiet but firm. "Why did you really do it?" He took a breath. "Because I can't keep calling this redemption if I'm not willing to lose something for it." Their eyes locked. "And because I want to prove that I'm not just showing up for applause," he added. "I'm showing up for accountability." Avery walked slowly to her desk and sat. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, layered with something heavier than forgiveness. Something more honest. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why didn't you ever fight your mother all those years ago? Why didn't you try to keep us safe?" Preston swallowed. The question cracked something deeper than guilt. "Because she built the world I thought I wanted. Power, legacy, respect, and I thought if I protected it, I'd be enough." He exhaled. "But I was wrong. I spent years protecting a name, and lost the people who would have loved me even if I had nothing." Avery didn't respond right away. She leaned back in her chair, watching the raindrops crawl down the window pane. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if you had shown up," she said quietly. "If you'd taken me to school, if we'd had awkward father-daughter dinners, if I'd ever heard your voice reading me a story." Preston's face shifted, something behind his eyes broke loose. His voice cracked. "I wonder that every day." They sat in the quiet with that. Then Avery asked, "What do you want now, Preston?" He paused. "Not to calculate, just to find the right words. I want to be in your life, not as a symbol, not as a benefactor, just a person. Your father, if you'll have me." Avery's throat tightened. "It's not that simple, I know." She looked down at her hands, then out at the rain. And then softly she said, "But maybe we could have a meal, just us. No work talk, no community meetings." Preston blinked like he wasn't sure he heard her right. "Really, just one meal. That's all I'm promising." His voice was thick. "That's more than I hoped for." She smiled, faint but real. "It's not forgiveness, not yet." "I don't expect it," he said. "But I'll earn it, one meal at a time, if that's what it takes." Outside, the rain eased like even the sky knew something had shifted. Not everything was healed. Not everything was resolved. But something had opened. Something real. Preston had never been nervous about dinner before. Not in boardrooms, not with investors, not even with city mayors. But as he sat at the small corner table at Acacia, a quiet little southern bistro tucked in an old Charleston row house, his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. The place was warm and understated, exposed brick walls, string lights woven through beams, tables close enough for soft voices, but not too close to feel cramped. It wasn't flashy, and that was the point. Avery chose it. He hadn't questioned her. He looked up every time the door opened. When she finally walked in, his breath caught. She wore a navy blue blouse, simple gold earrings, her hair half up. Nothing dramatic, but it was the most personal moment he'd ever had with her, seeing her outside the context of advocacy, of meetings, of that relentless sense of purpose she always carried like armor. "Hi," she said softly as she reached the table. He stood. "Hi." They both paused, unsure if they should hug. They didn't. Not yet. She sat smoothing her napkin across her lap. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said after a beat. Avery glanced up. Neither was I. He let out a small breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. "Well, I'm glad you did." A waiter approached. They ordered drinks, sweet tea for her, sparkling water for him, and then sat in silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just cautious. "I don't know what you want this to be," Preston admitted. "I'm not sure either," she replied. "But I figured one meal was a start." Preston nodded. "Then we start." A few moments passed as the waiter returned with their drinks and took their dinner order. Fried green tomatoes to share, shrimp and grits for her, blackened catfish for him. After the waiter left, Avery sipped her tea, then set the glass down and leaned forward slightly. "I read something about you," she said. His brow lifted. "Should I be nervous? It was an old profile, one of those young powerhouse to watch features. You were 31, already buying half of King Street." He groaned quietly. "That one followed me around for years." She smirked. "You said your biggest fear was failure." He paused. "That sounds about right. And that your biggest regret was not taking more risks?" He swallowed hard. "Ironic," she added, "considering what you walked away from." There it was again, that soft edge of truth she never sugarcoated. "I didn't see you as a risk," he said. "I saw you as the only thing that ever felt real. And that scared me more than losing everything else." Avery looked down her fingers, tracing the edge of the tablecloth. He went on, voice steady now. "It took me too long to realize that power without people is just noise." And now she asked, "Now I want a quieter life, but fuller, honest. One where I earn my place, not just inherit it." She didn't answer immediately. Then she asked, "Why now? Why me?" Preston didn't blink. "Because I lost the first 21 years. And I'll carry that, always. But I'd rather spend the rest of them showing up late, but not gone, than pretending the past makes me unworthy." Her eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. And if I say that showing up isn't enough, then I'll ask, what has he said? And I'll do it. Their dinner arrived. The scent of spices and butter filled the air, a small warmth between them. They ate slowly, the conversation loosening as the plates emptied. They talked about books, about Avery's work, about Lorraine's stubborn habit of always fixing things that weren't broken. Preston shared memories from college stories that didn't involve business, but embarrassment, laughter, mistakes. Real things. By the time dessert came, a shared slice of pecan pie, they weren't leaning away anymore. Their elbows were closer. The pauses between thoughts were softer. "You know, she set her fork in midair. I used to imagine what this would feel like." He looked up. "Not the dinner," she clarified. "But talking. You seeing me? Not the lawyer, not the activist, just me." "I see you," he said. She held his gaze. "Do you like what you see?" He smiled, gentle, earnest. "I'm proud of what I see." Avery exhaled. Her walls didn't fall, but they shifted just a little. She leaned back, looked around the restaurant, then back at him. "I don't know what this becomes, Preston. I'm still working through a lot, but I'm not running away from it anymore. Neither am I. They didn't hug when they left. But this time, when they walked outside into the cool night air, Avery didn't rush. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the street lamp casting a soft glow around them. "Same time next week?" she asked quietly. Preston's voice was low. "I'd love that." And for the first time, it didn't feel like a second chance. It felt like a real one. The second dinner turned into a third. Then a walk. Then coffee on a Sunday morning that stretched into an afternoon spent walking through the farmer's market, stopping to smell candles they didn't buy, and tasting jams they didn't need. Avery never said it out loud, but something had changed. It wasn't just Preston's presence, it was the absence of weight in her chest when he was around. He still carried guilt, and she still carried hurt. But now, they carried it together. On a Thursday afternoon, she sat in her office with Lorraine. He asked if I'd come to his foundation's board meeting next week, Avery said, sipping her coffee. Lorraine looked up from her reading glasses. "Are you going?" Avery hesitated. "I think I want to. He's trying to restructure the foundation's focus, more local grants, less flashy projects, and he wants my input." Lorraine raised a brow. "Your input or your blessing?" Avery gave her a look. "He's not trying to win points. He's trying to grow up." Her mother nodded slowly. People can change, especially when they realize legacy isn't just about money. That night, Preston met her outside her building. No dinner plans, no agenda. Just a walk. The sky had turned that soft lavender that only shows up for 10 minutes in Charleston when the sun dips behind the live oaks and everything feels held in a hush. They walked side by side. Preston slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. "I wanted to ask you something, but I don't want to push." Avery glanced over. "Ask." He took a breath. "What was she like when you were little? She didn't need to ask who." "My mom," he nodded. Avery smiled softly, eyes forward. "Strong. So strong, I didn't realize she was ever scared. She used to dance in the kitchen when the power got cut off. Said we were having a candlelight party." Preston's throat tightened. "She taught me how to fight without yelling, how to take up space even when people wished I'd shrink. And she told me stories about my dad. But only the good ones." His eyes watered, and he blinked it back. "She gave me more grace than I deserved. She gave me hope," Avery said, "that maybe the people who hurt us weren't all bad. Just lost." They walked a few more paces in silence. Then she asked, "What about you? What were you like when you were young?" He laughed under his breath. "Honestly, arrogant, eager to prove I was worth the Blackwell name. I studied economics in middle school just to impress my father. I wore suits to my high school debates." Avery laughed. "You were that kid." "Oh yeah, that annoying, overly prepared, emotionally repressed kid." She shook her head, smiling. "I would have rolled my eyes at you. You probably still do. Only when you earn it." They reached the steps to her building. She didn't walk up them. Not yet. Instead, she turned to him. "I got a letter last week," she said. "From Della." He tilted his head. "The housekeeper. She said your mother called her, a week before she died." Preston went still. She told Della that she'd made a mess of things, that she'd clung to power because she didn't know how to ask for love, and that the one thing she regretted most was not letting you become your own man. His jaw tightened. Avery stepped closer. "She didn't get to say that to you. But I thought you deserved to know." His voice came out rough. "Thank you." They stood there in the evening light, the world quiet around them. Preston looked at her not just with affection, but with awe. "I don't know how you do it. Carry all of this and still give space for others to grow." She shrugged. "I learned from the best." Then gently she said, "You asked me once what I wanted from you. I think I finally know." He waited. "I want you to keep building," she said. "But not just buildings. Trust. Spaces where people can breathe. Families that don't have to fight for dignity." Preston nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll do." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "I'm still scared sometimes, that you'll disappear, that I'll get used to this and lose it all again." "I won't disappear," he said, voice steady. "Not this time." And for the first time she believed him. She stepped forward and gently, slowly leaned into his shoulder. He didn't move, just stood there letting her rest against him as the last of the lavender light faded into dusk. Nothing flashy, no big declarations, just presence. And for now, that was everything. The graduation ceremony was being held under a wide white canopy at the City College downtown, a school that had once been out of reach for girls like Avery, and yet here she was. Rows of folding chairs filled the lawn sun, catching on polished shoes and pressed gowns. Proud families leaned forward with phones waiting for names to be called. Avery stood off stage in her deep green robe cap in hand, scanning the crowd. Her hands trembled just a little. It wasn't nerves. It was something else, something heavier, something deeper. Somewhere near the middle of the crowd, Lorraine waved wildly, smiling wide. Next to her stood Preston. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a button-down and slacks. He had a small bouquet in his hands, white peonies, her favorite somehow. She hadn't told him that. Next to Preston stood a little girl in a polka-dot dress holding his hand. Her name was Maya. The first time Avery met her, she couldn't speak for several seconds. The resemblance was haunting. Same eyes, same tilt to the chin. Preston had told her everything. Eventually. Maya's mother had been a woman he met years ago during one of those long, lonely stints of overcompensating work and silence. He hadn't known about Maya until a year ago. When he did, he stepped up. No hesitation, no questions. Avery hadn't spoken for a full day after he told her, but now watching him stand there, steady, gentle, brushing Maya's curls out of her face as she squinted towards the stage, Avery felt the twist in her chest slowly begin to uncoil. The dean called her name. Ms. Avery Caldwell, Master of Urban Planning and Community Development. The crowd clapped. Avery walked forward steady. She didn't look at the camera. She didn't look at the line of faculty shaking hands. She looked at them. Her mother, her father, and the child who carried pieces of them both. After the ceremony, she found them near the fountain. Lorraine hugged her tight, whispering, "Your grandmother would be dancing in the clouds right now." Maya tugged on Avery's gown. "Are you a real grown-up now?" Avery laughed. "I think so." Preston stepped forward slowly, holding out the flowers. "You did it." She took them, smiling softly. "We did." They stood in silence, the air warm and sweet with the scent of magnolia. Then Avery looked at him. Really looked. "You froze when you saw her." Preston blinked, caught. "What? At the ceremony?" "You saw Maya and froze. You looked like you'd seen a ghost." He let out a shaky breath. "I did. A ghost of a life I should have known sooner. But now you do." He nodded. "Now I do." Avery crouched down to Maya's height. "Hey, do you know who I am?" The little girl looked at her with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy said you're Avery. You're really smart." Avery smiled. "I'm also your sister." Maya blinked, then lit up. "Really, like real sister. Real as it gets." Maya looked up at Preston. "Can I hug her?" He nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Maya wrapped her arms tight around Avery's neck, and Avery held her back, eyes closing as tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. When she stood again, Preston's voice was quiet. Thank you for letting her know. She deserves truth, Avery said. And so do we. They stood in a triangle now past present and future, all tangled into one imperfect, undeniable family. Avery reached for Preston's hand. Let's not waste any more time, she said. He looked down at her fingers in his, then up at her eyes. We won't. Not everything was healed. Not every scar had faded. But some things like love, like redemption, weren't about erasing the past. They were about building something new on top of it. Brick by honest brick. Together.